The views expressed on the Badge to the Bone podcast, while often accurate and sometimes even funny, are not intended to represent the official positions of any law enforcement, public safety agency, or their employees. So lighten up. This podcast contains mature themes, strong language, violence, and nudity. Okay, maybe not the last two. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Badge of the Bone podcast. I'm Denny,
I'm Al.
and we are here with yet another episode and a guest tonight. I think it's going to be good and a lot of fun.
All right, stand by. We're ready to go.
Let's jump right on in.
So, Denny, I'm pretty excited about our guest tonight.
Yeah. We got Nick from the Roll Call Room podcast.
Yes, we do. We have Nick, Roll Call Room podcast. Just probably one of the best. Definitely one of my favorite podcasts. Period, but probably one of the best law enforcement related podcasts I've ever heard.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I remember meeting Nick, and he was telling me he had a podcast, and I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to check it out and listen. And man, it's just a really good podcast. I mean, everything they cover, and it's fun, it's funny, but it's also serious.
Yeah, they strike that perfect balance between serious and insightful, and also just being funny as shit.
No doubt.
So, but Nick is, Nick's does more than that. I mean, he's a best-selling author.
He is.
He's
several books.
Yes, several books. One that is just phenomenal, Police Mental Barricade.
Yep.
Telling his story as a suicide survivor and surviving the leadership crisis within his department. Just
yeah. And if you haven't read that, you need to read that. It's not a super long read, which is great.
No.
But definitely got to read that.
No, but it's a story I think is going to resonate with a lot of people.
Yep. And he's got several books.
Mm-hmm. The Dark Side of the Blue Line.
Yes, it's another good one. But Amazon has all of it, and we're gonna make sure to put on our site, put up some of the titles for his books. So those that are interested in reading some of the things he's put out, we'll put it on there so you can see what he has to offer and take a read. But they're definitely good reads. He puts out some good stuff.
One of the things I think he does such a great job at is that intersection of mental health and leadership.
Yes. Well, then that's something that's important to us.
And it's just so critical.
It is, because, I mean, there's a tie in there.
Absolutely. But, I think he's waiting in the Badge to the Bone green room, if you will. So,
I think you may be right.
Yeah.
So let's check in with Nick. Hey, Nick, welcome to Badge to the Bone.
Hey, how you doing, Nick?
What is up, fellas? How are you?
I think we're doing well.
Yeah? You ever see that movie Groundhog's Day with
That sounds kind of familiar.
I have seen that movie, and I almost feel like I'm living that movie.
So, just so your listeners know, this is 6? 5?
Maybe 5.
27, 28.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've tried to hook up and do an episode, and we did it. Wow, man, we did 2 hours of a banger. Like, it was fucking top notch. And then this program you and I both use that I don't know whether or not we're just loyal, or for me it's laziness. I don't want to find something else, and it just did us wrong. It was like, I felt like I was Max Headroom. Remember that fucking guy?
Oh, I remember Max Headroom, man.
Yeah.
Pepsi?
Yeah.
That's what it's like, right? It sounded like I was Max Headroom, right?
It really did. It really did. I could see you as Max Headroom.
I feel like Max Headroom because as we record this episode, I'm having the worst allergy attack, so my eyes are almost swelled shut. And I just discovered that half of one of my teeth molars in the back is missing.
Oh,
So that would explain why I've had like tooth pain for 3 months.
Yeah, that would do it.
That
That
will
would do it,
tend to
right?
cause that. Yeah, that will tend to cause it. Holy moly.
Something.
Well, man, we appreciate you toughing it out.
Yeah, man. I mean, we should do an episode like right after I get it pulled out. One, because it's gonna sound like I'm like studying for the lieutenant's process with something in my mouth, and two, it just is gonna be hilarious because I'm just gonna be in so much pain. So I'm just gonna say whatever. Not like I don't anyway, you know.
I was about to say,
How is that different than
yeah,
any given day?
Yeah. You know, I get in so much hot water. Most recently, me and a certain international Chiefs Association kind of thing, and I are going back and forth on social media.
Are you now?
Okay,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to go into that a little more.
So on my podcast, and then on I do a joint podcast with the folks from the Shield Within, called Off Duty and On the Air. And everything I talk about is always like books, and everything I talk about is mental health, officer mental health, and the suicide epidemic as a result of poor law enforcement leadership. Like when folks think about cops killing themselves, like, oh man, you know, they must have been in some financial bind or a relationship issue or something like that. But they really don't peel back the layers and really discover that 99.9%. I only say this because I'm a survivor myself, and 100% of my reason was my dickbag chief. And they don't understand that that's a direct reflection of poor morale leading to mental health issues. And I called out this one particular national organization, and I'm not going to say who it is, only because I don't want to affect anyone's job. I called them out. I said, you know, you guys have conferences, and it makes me sick because I see it on LinkedIn and I see it on Facebook. You know, they're always having conferences and they're giving these beautiful acrylic or glass like trophies or whatever the fuck they are to these chiefs. And I saw one in particular right where we live, or kind of where we live. And he just left his old agency, is now at another agency, infecting that agency. And they gave this dickbag an award. And I'm like, you guys are like so oblivious to the rank and file. And you don't hold any of your members, you don't hold any of your chiefs of police accountable. Like, you put your head in the fucking sand and you're like, you don't come up with anything. It's just it's sickening to me, and I think that they've gotten away with it for so long, that that chiefs of police hide behind this organization, or they join this organization as almost like a fraternity, like almost as like their getaway. They get to go away to conferences like 3 or 4 times a year, and they don't really learn anything about leadership. If anything, they learn from each other how to be worse. Like they travel and they get to a conference and they're like, oh, let me show you how I'm fucking my people so you could fuck your people. And they're not really learning anything. And they're not inviting folks like you or I to come talk at the conference.
Right. Yep.
You know, nobody wants Nick or Denny or Al to stand up on the stage in front of chiefs and tell them that they suck.
Well, if you did, they're going to label you as disgruntled. You're just a disgruntled
and
employee, and you don't understand the view from what they deal with. Yeah, it's all back to you're disgruntled. You're disgruntled and pissed off.
Yeah, and
rather than actually look for a reason.
Oh yeah, and those of you that are fans of your show that have not crossed over to the Roll Call Room or read any of the books, that's exactly what happened when I left my department. The department was like, oh, what we're going to do is we're going to smear this guy's reputation and just call him a disgruntled employee. All the stuff he writes about, all the stuff he talks about in his podcast, he's just a fucking disgruntled employee. He didn't like the way that he was pushed out, or they label you something else to discredit your integrity. And it didn't work. Like, it didn't work at all. Like the first book, they tried as hard as they could. Fuck, they even tried litigation they even tried to like have the city attorney look at the book and figure out a way to stop the publication of the book or to sue for defamation. And the definition of defamation is, I don't even know the definition. I just made that up. But no, I know the definition only because I went through it. But you have to spread falsehoods.
Right.
And so everything
You're spreading slander that has no basis in fact.
Correct. Thank you, Al, because the Benadryl is kicking in, and I didn't. I don't know. So they were like.
So I'm going to cut in for those that don't know. We're talking about your first book, Police Mental Health Barricade.
Correct. Yeah. So that book, I wrote that book. I want to say like a week after I got forced out of my agency, and it was because like right after it happened, I was in bed, like I couldn't get out of bed. I was so depressed, and I thought like my whole world revolved around my department. I mean, you both can relate to that.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my kids were babies when I first started. Like one was still in a bassinet when I first started, and then when I got kicked out. Like 16, 17 years old. And so for me, it was like, what the fuck? Like all this time I wasted. What the fuck? And I remember like my wife saying, you got to go to therapy. You got to go to therapy. And I wouldn't fucking go to therapy, which is bonkers now. Like I think about it. I'm like, that's crazy, you know? And even when I was on the job, I never went to therapy. When they had those debriefs after a traumatic incident, I was one of those guys that was like,
right. Oh yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. That's what. Yep. I don't need that shit. And I was never on the mental health train at all. And, I went to go see my therapist, and my therapist was like, you should write a journal. And I was like, fucking journal. I was like, what the fuck? Am I like a 16-year-old girl? Like,
your diary today sucks.
yeah. And I thought of two things when she told me that. One, a 16-year-old girl like in her room talking about like her boyfriend or some relationship issues. And the second one I thought of was Doogie Howser.
I remember that. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And he'd always type on the computer. That's what I fucking felt like and so I mustered the strength up, got out of bed, and I sat down in front, like in my kitchen, and I wrote that first book. And it was like 5 or 6 days it took me to write like the full book. Now, mind you, folks that are listening, this is not a fucking Stephen King novel by no means. This is a double-spaced book with big font for folks like me, Al, and Denny.
Exactly right.
Really slow reading, hour and a half tops. And I made it that way because I wanted you to be able to hold this book in your duty bag and be able to read it in a shift, like in one shift. Pull over, put the red light on, and the interior red light on, and just read this book.
But, that's actually, I got to tell you, that's really almost ingenious, because if you know the cop culture, nobody's going to put that book in their car if it's got 50 chapters in it. They're not going to read War and Peace in their car. Most cops, it's a short attention span, and they want to be able to read something that's going to get to the point.
You're saying we have short attention spans?
Well, yeah. I mean,
big fucking time. And I was just as guilty of that, because in my new job that I'm at, I've read more books this past, I just celebrated my 1 year with the company that I'm with. I've read more books in that 1 year than I've probably read in my whole entire life. And by read, folks, I mean audiobook, because let's be honest, I grew up in New York City, have a New York City public education, so I need the words to me and broken down almost in Braille, and
sound it out very slowly.
And now slow. I even need my audiobooks to have pictures, if that makes sense.
Do they have a version that eliminates the big words and puts the smaller words in?
Yeah, every once in a while they'll throw a picture up on the phone as you're driving, and you're like, oh. Oh, so pretty. Oh.
So I got to say, like, as following you and your work with your podcast for as long as I have, and the times we've tried this before, I admit I had not yet read Police Mental Health Barricade, and I tore into it, and because I could get it on Kindle with the giant font because I'm going blind.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
His font size is called Billboard.
You know what? When you publish a book to Amazon, you have to click that option to allow people to have the font that big for your book.
well, because
I don't-
increasingly there's people like me that need it.
And me because I refuse to wear glasses. Like, I'm supposed to wear glasses all the fucking time, driving and everything. And I'd rather fucking squint than wear glasses.
I wear contacts now. I'm going to have to go to like bifocal contacts or something because I will not go to glasses full time.
Yeah, I can't do contacts because I don't like eye fucking myself. Like, like putting it in, I tried it and I was like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. But yeah, so I mean, the book was really like, if you read, well, you have read the book, the first like 2-3 chapters read like a journal, and then
Well,
it
it was my takeaway is it's like a how-to guide in institutionalized organizational gaslighting.
Yeah. Oh my. Fuck, that needs to be on Amazon as the description.
That's what it was. It was like it's not us, Nick. It's you. It's you. You're the problem.
Yeah, and you don't realize it. Like, I didn't realize it. Like, I released the book. When you self-publish, you just, like, I used Amazon. I went on there and I published it, and it was like, within 24 hours, your book is going to be available as Kindle, as a ebook first, and then you're publishing, like, your hard copy books or soft cover books will be ready in a couple of days. And Denny and I went through this when him and I wrote a book together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first book was just a fucking Hail Mary. It was like, fuck it, I'm going to release it because it makes me feel good. It made me feel like I completed something. It made me feel like I took something from such a shitty situation. And I remember waking up the next morning. And first of all, the first thing that was the coolest experience for me, and Denny, you can speak to this too, is putting your first and last name into Amazon and something coming up.
Oh yeah,
huge to me. Like, that was,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. And I've never been a certificate person. Like, you can see on camera behind me, the only thing I have is this shadow box that they gave me when I first left. But I'm not like I need to be jerked off kind of person. Like, I've never been that way. But that was like, first, that was super, super cool. But then to see the yellow banner above the title saying #1 bestseller, and I was like, this is how much I wasn't rationalizing it at the time, and this is how much I wasn't seeing the importance of it. You're both gonna laugh. I literally said to myself and my wife when it happened, I said, my book must have been the only book that came out today on Amazon.
Right.
On
Only
Amazon.
book of 1,000 that came out that day.
The only fucking book. Like, and then after a couple of hours went by, it was still there. Then a couple of days went by, it was still there. And then it started to hit me, and then immediately emails started coming in from cops from Florida, from California, from Alaska, from overseas. These folks were emailing me and saying, thank you for writing this, because my chief is exactly like that, or my lieutenant is exactly like that. And you said it perfectly, Al. It is professional gaslighting at its best, because you don't realize it's going on because you're in this cult. You're in this law enforcement cult where you're like, no, I have to get fucked every day. No, I got to do this because it's for the cause. No, this is the way that it is.
Well, it's also interesting too that, because we were talking earlier about, oh, you're just disgruntled. Oh, you're just disgruntled. And, and then I read the book and I see, like, just the commitment that you made to the profession and to the agency. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, the situations where I've seen this play out the most, it has been, strangely enough, the officers that are the most committed to the job and the officers that are most committed to the agency end up getting fucked the hardest.
Yep. And I'll tell you this, and we talked about it the first or the second time we tried to record this, was you have to read the book to really understand what my department did to get me out. And think of the worst possible thing that you could do to somebody, and that's what they did. And had I have been guilty of what they accused me of, my character and the way that I am, you'd have never fucking heard from me again. I'd have been silent. I would have been embarrassed. I'd have been ashamed. But to do that and know that I didn't do anything wrong just enraged me. It enraged me in a way that I've never been like that before. And not enraged in a violent way. Enraged in a way where my sole purpose was to get my chief removed from his position. That's all I saw. Forget about the people that did this stuff to me at his behest. Those people are next. Or those are the folks that I've worked on slowly. The chief was in the crosshairs.
And I just thinking about that, because that second part is one that I've seen play out in my career, and probably, it's bad enough that you got one person that's causing all these problems, right? But then the people that will carry the water for that person with zero questions,
100%.
That fucking infuriates me no less than the one at the top. Because if somebody is telling you to do something fucked up and you just happily go along anyway, what the hell is wrong with you?
Well, that's part of self-preservation. They know that if I don't do this bidding, that I will be replaced tomorrow, and then they will be in the same boat that you're in, because they will shuffle. It's almost like racing in Talladega. They're going to get shuffled out the line and shuffled to the back of the line and be buried.
But we ask how we end up with the leadership culture that seems to be so pervasive in law enforcement today. And it's that if you got 10 police executives that are shitbags, then you got 100 senior leaders carrying their water. I mean, it's exponential. And the only reason those people at the top can be who they are is because they got all those people that are willing to carry their water, to be their force multiplier and get out there and do that. And if they didn't, maybe we wouldn't have this problem.
Well, it's two things. So my youngest daughter is making my wife and I rewatch The Walking Dead. We were big fans back in the day. And now that I'm watching it, because when I first watched it, I was on the job. Now I'm not on the job. And I'm watching it, and have either one of you been Walking Dead people?
I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't seen it all the way through.
Shame on both of you. Anyway, so in this thing is there's always bad guys that attack our group that we follow throughout The Walking Dead. And it reminds me of the chief role when you're a dickbag, because these folks, like Al said, they wouldn't be able to do the things that they do if they didn't have loyal followers that don't question whether or not it's right to do. And that's what was going on in my department. That's what's still going on in my old department. Because now that the chief was removed, or I'm sorry, he retired with 2 weeks notice. Which is fucking unheard of. And we'll get to how that happened. But now they're all lost. Now they don't know what to do, and there's such infighting going on in my old agency that they're cannibals. They're eating each other to try and get to that next level. And it's crazy to watch, because what COVID did for all law enforcement across the United States, across the world actually, it really exposed really poor law enforcement leaders because they were not brought up during wartime. They were brought up during peacetime. They made their promotions when everything was fucking hunky dory. The community loved us. Everything was going fucking great. Well, Floyd happened and all these other things happened. And then COVID hit. And then that's when we needed real battle driven leaders, real solid leaders to turn around and come into roll calls and say, hey, listen, I know shit's bad, but it's going to get better. And until it does get better, I'm going to be out there on the street with you. There's none of that fucking going on.
No, on the contrary, I think you got a whole lot of, what do you mean? Stop complaining. Everything's wonderful. How could you? Everything's great.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I know we had talked about that before, that whole wartime, peacetime kind of comparison, because I really do think you really hit on something there. Because you look at the status of law enforcement, and it really was. It was, ops normal for such a long time. You didn't have the whole, we were beyond the crack epidemic and all that violence. You were past, some of the huge violence that you had, during the 70s and stuff like that. And you really got into it, like, let's say crime was low for the most part, and it was smooth sailing for the longest time. And
now they're lost. You have leaders that are so lost. They're in the weeds with shit. They're coming up with shit that's so, like, you're a frontline officer right now. You're just scratching your fucking head and you're going, why does that fucking matter right now? We have the worst recruitment in the history of our profession, and you're worried about me using my fucking cell phone while I'm on duty? Like NYPD, they're cracking down on officers using their cell phones and all this other crazy fucking shit that they're cracking down on. And
when they don't have people that'll answer calls, they don't have the people to handle the call volume.
Who wants to be proactive right now? Like my old law enforcement agency, there's shots fired almost every day. The crime is through the roof in my old agency. And we got my the new chief of police, who I used to work for when he was a lieutenant and a captain. You got him turning around having cookouts every Friday in communities. That's going to fix everything.
Let's have a hot dog, right? That's awesome.
Cookouts solve crime like pizza parties fix morale.
Pizza party.
It's always, you always, like, you remember it.
Oh, yeah.
Morale is low. You hear chatter that officers are unhappy. You order like 3 pies from Domino's Pizza for $25, and you have them brought to roll call. And then when people complain after that, you go, well, fuck them. We bought them pizza. We bought the pizza. That didn't fix it. Fuck them. That's how they look at stuff like that.
And it's a shame.
It is, because nobody's beating down the door. Like when Al wanted to be a cop, you wanted to be a cop, and I wanted to be a cop. We were running around as kids playing cops and robbers. We knew we wanted to fucking do this job. Now you got people coming into this profession with a master's in Russian literature because they can't get a fucking job in a fucking museum. So to them, they're like, "Oh, I'll just become a cop.
I'll just be a cop. What the hell?"
Yeah, and they get hired because they have a squeaky clean background. They can pass a polygraph. They can pass a background, but they've never been in an altercation with anybody of the alternate race. They've never faced adversity. They've never turned around and been told no. And then you put those people in the inner cities or the struggling communities with people of the opposite race. And the first time somebody gets in their face, the first thing that they're going to grab for is their fucking gun, because they have no life experience. They don't know how to fucking talk to people.
Or they're just going to shit the bed and fall apart completely.
Right. And that's what I'm afraid of is we haven't seen the stats yet for line of duty deaths. The amount of line of duty deaths, and man, knock on wood, I hope I'm wrong. The line of duty death increase is going to exponentially increase within the next 5 years. We're already seeing it with suicides. we're losing we're losing more officers to suicides than we are to line of duty deaths right now.
Yep.
And nobody's talking about it.
Well, from a research standpoint, we're just scratching the surface of that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, people are in academic circles, and I have a good friend of mine who is part of academia and follows policing issues, very fascinated with policing issues. And he's like, yeah, this is happening. Your suicides have gone up dramatically, but we don't know why. And I started having these conversations about, well, this is why, kind of like what we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah.
And nobody is actually digging below that surface number of how many suicides do we have.
Correct. Or the best part, this one's my favorite. My favorite is when I see on social media that these organizations, and I'll call them organizations, that are supposed to help combat law enforcement suicide. And I'm not going to name them because, one, I don't want to get sued, and two, you can figure out who they are.
Sure.
One are the ones that take a salary. You're an organization and you take a salary. That to me right there is a red flag. Two, when I see these law enforcement organizations holding conferences and having keynote speakers talk at these conferences that are PhDs in mental health or some sort of academia talking at these conferences, and they're not inviting folks like Denny or me or you or Mark from The Shield Within to come and talk, you're falling on deaf ears. Because if you've ever talked to law enforcement officers, retired and current, at a training session or a conference, if it isn't another cop talking to them, they turn right off.
Yep.
They don't want to hear Dr. So-and-so tell them that what they're feeling is natural. I don't want to hear that. What I want to hear is, I want to hear somebody go up there and go, listen, I've been there. I've been at the corner of my bed with my gun in my hand, going to blow my brains out because I couldn't deal with the constant beat up sessions at my agency. But they won't invite us. They won't invite us.
So I think the reason for that is that if an agency does that, then that chief is going to have to look in the mirror. The chief is going to have to acknowledge things. They just as soon say, doesn't exist. Here, have a slice of pizza and forget about it.
100%. 100%. And it all is self-reflecting.
Right. And I'll rewind a little further. The people that are getting hired, like you said, squeaky clean, no confrontation, this reinforces something that you said in your book, and that's that we have an executive leadership culture that is not about the betterment of the agency, but is focused on optics and liability.
100%.
And they are looking through both these issues, whether we're talking about hiring or who we're bringing in to talk about mental health, if we're even going to bother to talk about mental health, through that prism.
Well, the reason they focus on those two issues is because that is where their job preservation lies. That is 100% where their job preservation lies. Optics and liability are what they fear is going to remove them from their position.
Well, and talking about mental health when you're an acting chief is like the third rail conversation. You don't touch it. You don't go near it. And I remember when I was still working for my agency is when we started, me and my former co-host started the Roll Call Room podcast. And we got 5 episodes in before we got called upstairs to the chief's office. And I remember it still to this day, walking in there, and I printed out the emails from people that were emailing us saying, you saved my life. Like, I'm going to get therapy now. I'm on medication. And I printed these out and I showed it to my chief. I was still naive to think that he would turn around and get behind it and be a pioneer in law enforcement and turn around and get behind it and be like, hey, listen, I support this. And he didn't. He was like, I can't tell you to shut it down because you have a First Amendment right, but I'm still going to send it to the city attorney's office to make sure that you don't trip over yourself. And it was like a subtle threat, and I didn't see it at the time. I was still very, very naive. I still was like, oh, he's looking out for us. Yeah, he was looking out for us. All right. He was looking for the city attorney to give him a reason to discipline me and my former co-host. And when that didn't work, he had other things in motion already. Like he had other plans. And when we're talking about retention for officers and being squeaky clean, I'll ask you this. If you're an applicant now, today, in today's climate, if you're a police applicant right now and you've been at 4 different departments and you go to apply at a department right now, this is your 5th department you're going to go work at, would they get hired right now?
They'd be seen as a red flag.
Correct,
It,
right?
it could easily be a red flag. It would also depend on like the time frame. Are we talking about 4 departments in 20 years? Or are we talking about 4 departments in 4 years?
Let's say 4 departments in a 10-year period.
Yeah, that would probably not be good.
I think,
So go ahead, Denny.
no, I was just going to say, that's one of those things that really just needs to be evaluated. It
Okay.
needs to be a case-by-case basis.
So why is it okay for chiefs of police then?
Yeah, well, it's 100% okay for them. They'll jump around. They'll go 5 departments in 5 years.
Nick, you just don't understand. You don't understand. I was called to this other locality because they needed me. They needed me.
I'm here to save them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they can go 5 departments in 5. They can go 1 department every year. And it's nobody even thinks to question it at all.
No, and if anything, these city managers or mayors, they look at these chiefs and they go, "Holy shit! Look at all this experience I'm getting. 7 departments in 15 years,
and they're all in flames."
They're all and that's the best part is nobody decided to pick up the phone and call any of these former departments, unions or associations, and say, "Hey, what was it like working for them?" The first one, if they give a negative review, you're like, they're just pissed off. He just went in there and he was disciplining them and trying to straighten it out. By the third one, if they're like, this guy's a piece of shit, you might not want to hire them. But
and really one of the big things that should be like this is a clue, underline, giant spotlights, everything is, what's their recruitment and retention look like during their tenure? And if it is a total dumpster fire, that should be a clue. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of like city mayors, county supervisors that are looking at that and go, well, he was just getting rid of the air quotes disgruntled ones.
Yeah, and demographics has a lot to do with it now. Your ethnic background has a lot to do with your value in law enforcement right now. So much so that my former agency decided to go outside of the agency to hire an assistant chief of police. National search, right? National search, they found a guy that lives 35 miles from my old agency that shot his daughter at his old agency because he mistook her as an intruder.
What?
Yeah.
Please tell me that's not real.
100% accurate.
Holy shit.
100. This is a brand new hire. Within the last 6 months, they hired this guy. National search for an assistant chief of police. National.
And that's what they came up with.
That's what they came up with.
Oh,
and it blows my fucking mind because if that was an officer, do you think he would have gotten hired?
No.
No way.
Ever.
Wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole.
But this guy has his demographics working for him. This guy's got people pulling for him from that National Police Chief Association that I did speak about. And that's a problem. They're not looking at the future. They're not looking at, some lieutenant that puts his resume in to be a chief of police, and he's got an impeccable history of having people that have worked for him and elevated them. I don't give a shit that you've been a chief for 15 years or 20 years. I care that you were a sergeant and how many people underneath you were promoted to the next level. That's what I care about. That's my when I was a sergeant, that was the most proud. That was the proudest thing for me. Was as a sergeant, I helped 19 people get promoted to sergeant. 19. That's incredible. And it's an anomaly in law enforcement because you tend to see a lot of cannibalism where nobody wants to help anybody get promoted. It's like, oh, you could be a threat to me if you get promoted. And it's crazy to think. And folks that are not in law enforcement have no clue that shit goes on. No fucking clue.
Well, what does it say to the guy or the gal that worked their way up? You know, that was at your former agency, they were a sergeant, they were lieutenant, maybe they made captain, they were doing all the right things. And yeah, you just hit the ceiling. That's it. That's it. And then the only way that they can better themselves is to leave the agency, and you may not want to lose them.
Right.
But if they want to continue to grow and continue to advance, they got to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, look at how many great people that we've lost in law. I could just tell you from my old agency, 30, 40 people that have left since I've left. And as a citizen of that city, I would be scared. I would be scared because with crime skyrocketing, these young, brand new officers have no fucking clue what they're doing. And no disrespect to them. It's a tough job. I get it.
Sure.
Been there. But you got nobody showing you the ropes. You got babies training babies. You got 2-year, 3-year officers training brand new recruits out of the academy. 3 years, your fucking shoelaces haven't even loosened yet. They're still fresh and clean. But you're going to train some brand new person, brand new officer. Crazy.
Well, look at the retirements. My father's day, I'm a second generation officer, and in his day, he was 43 years he spent in law enforcement. And most of his generation in law enforcement, they were 30 plus years, 30, 35 plus years, and they would just stay and work. And now it's folks are hitting their retirement years and boom, they are punching their
well,
teeth.
there's no as somebody who is at that point, right? Who has got a countdown clock that measures in days, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you. God help me. That there's no incentive to stay. Well, I could easily work another, 10, 12 years happily, but there's no incentive. I mean, there just isn't.
Especially now that, like, outside of law enforcement, your worth is so high right now. Like in the private sector, like where I work, they actually value former law enforcement and they pay a shit ton of money for it.
Yep.
And I don't have to run after anybody. Nobody curses me out every day. Like it's fucking great. But I think
believe it or not, you can actually stay in law enforcement as a retiree, like part-time or contract, and I'm seeing things opening and I'm like, wow, I couldn't have done that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks in law enforcement are starting to see that value. And that's one of the big things it would be even much worse if more in law enforcement knew how much that their experience would be valued. I think a lot of folks look at it. I mean, like I did before I left, I was like, what the hell else am I going to do? This is all I know how to do. I don't know how to do anything else. I'm not equipped to do anything else. This is, I'm stuck, but you're really not. I mean,
holy crap. Hey, Nick, we are not getting assaulted here at the bar. It's like, do you hear this? Yeah,
it is. I don't know if you can hear it.
I'm going to be honest with you and your listeners. I really thought Denny was doing wash in the background. I thought that was a washing machine the whole fucking time. And I didn't want to say anything. I was like, wow, I've never done wash while I've had my podcast rolling. I mean,
yeah.
I got to keep my drawers clean, man.
in my old episodes of the roll call room, it's funny because we used to do them in my basement, and it was before I had really good equipment. And even after I had good equipment, you could hear my fucking dogs running back and forth. So my co-host used to say it was like filming at Jurassic Park. Like,
It sounds like a cow pissing on a flat rock in here right now, but
it's
I don't know how much is coming through. But
I'm just in case anybody's listening, they're like, where the hell are they?
What
What are
is
they
going on?
doing?
Yeah. What are they at King's Dominion? But I want to go back because I wrote this down on a piece on my Alzheimer's paper. I'll make a prediction also, which is because recruitment is so bad in law enforcement, I think the next thing that's going to change within law enforcement is the retirement age and vesting time. I think you're going to see pretty soon 15 years and out.
Oh, I don't think you're ever going to see not. It's
see, and I support that.
Not in this state. You're not going to see it. I think you'd be hard pressed to see it in places like the Northeast that have really strong unions. I think you'd be hard pressed to see it there.
Well,
20 and out, I think that you might
out,
see.
20 and out is like NYPD has it, Philly has it, LAPD has it. The 15 and out is going to be like probably 50% is your pension. Like that would be the selling point.
Have you heard of anybody that's even talking about that?
No, I just predicted. You know why? Because how else are you going to get people to come into this profession and convince them to stay 25 years?
I don't think anybody's thought that far ahead at all.
I do think you're right. I think we will see that if it continues to go this way. And good, bad, or different, I support having a lower retirement option on the end of, I mean, you don't know how bad it's going to affect. I mean, you think about the toll it takes on you, and you have to go through 25 years and even 20 years, but to have that option at like 15 years, where if you get to, I've seen enough, I've done enough, it is taking a toll, but at least you can punch out and you still get something for your time. And you can go and do something else. So instead of being stuck and burnout and having the mental wellness issues and trying to dig out another 10 years,
we have agencies in this state that don't have a public safety retirement option. There's not many, but they're there, and that's because our state legislature. I think if they could go back and get rid of public safety retirement, they'd get rid of it. It's a pain in the ass. Nobody wants it. I venture a guess that the teachers' unions can't stand it. I tell you, it's going to be a hard sell in this state.
Well,
now,
I'll tell you, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, like you have like Atlanta, for example. They don't do a pension anymore. They are completely 401k. So you come on board there and you do 3, 4, 5 years and you want to punch out. It's just like any other private sector job. You just move your 401k. So there's no incentive for those people to stick around.
And I don't see anything wrong with that because when I left,
no, neither do I.
When I left law enforcement and I looked at how much, because I left before I can retire. So they said to me, you could leave your money in there, wait till you're 55, and you can collect for the rest of your life, I don't know, $400 or $500 a month. And I was like, well, how much is in the bank? And they were like, this is how much is in there. And I'm like, in 17 years, this is all I put in?
Yeah, I looked at mine.
And had I have taken that $300 a paycheck and put it in a Fidelity account or a 401 account and been able to manage it myself, I'd have been a millionaire. And it's sad because when you get on the job, you don't think about that stuff. When you're 22, 23 years old and you start on the job, your dick is just hard because you got a police job. That's all you care about, that you're carrying a gun and a badge. And I got to tell you, when the older folks told me when I came in, watch your deferred retirement account, the one that you can control with moving investments. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I didn't listen to them. the folks that are listening that are year 1 to 5 right now, one, you should have at least a 401k set up outside of your agency. And if you can afford to put $10 or $20 a paycheck in that, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're going to make this a 20, 30-year career, man, if you do it right and you get a good financial advisor, fuck the pension that you're going to get. That money alone is your fucking real bank. I mean, it's sad that, like, and I think we talked about it the first couple of times we tried to record this episode. Like, I wish I would have left and came to this company that I'm working with now a long time ago, because my stocks, my 401 are going to be worth more in 4 years than if I had stayed with law enforcement for 30 years. That's sad. A private company is investing more in me than when I was out there with a gun and a badge and a vest chasing after people.
Because I think you have a lot of the private sector, and the private sector takes shit too, you know.
Yeah.
But I think they're more inclined to look at you as a talent, as a resource, whereas a PD, you're just another code number.
You're replaceable. You're looked at, we'll find someone to fill that uniform tomorrow. And that's always been the idea is, well, if you don't like this job, then there's 10 people behind you that'll take your position. See you later.
Oh, and by the way, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, if you speak up, there's something wrong. But you know what? I think that ideology, that thought process is catching up with law enforcement. I think we have a big bill to pay as a profession. I think that bill is coming due.
I think you're right.
I haven't seen any indication, and because of some of the work that I do, I'm a little closer to some of these things, and I haven't seen anything internally or externally that leads me to think that that's dawned on anybody yet.
Well, that's
you
where
talk about that organization of police executives. I follow what they say. I pay attention to what they say. I haven't seen them having a discussion about that at all.
No, they're too busy having discussions on, like, and I can't give it away because it'll give who I'm talking about. But the folks that are listening, you're smart. You can figure it out. And there's not just one. We have one in Virginia that is strictly for chiefs. I'm sure there's one in Jersey or Florida or whatever. Do yourself a favor. Tickle your pickle a little bit. Go on their social media accounts. Go on their websites and read their mission statement. That always gives me a good chuckle. When I'm down and out in a day, I go on their website, read their mission, and it gives me a good chuckle inside. I'm like, ha, that's funny. That's hilarious that you believe that that's the philosophy that you should have for chiefs of police. And then, like I said, they all get together once a year, and typically they pick a really, really nice place like Miami or San Diego or Hawaii or somewhere nice so that these chiefs on the taxpayer's dime could take a trip for a week. And 95% of them don't even go to the conference every day. They check into the hotel and then check off for the whole week. And then the only time they show up is if they're going to get an award. And the award is like most improved dickhead, or like, some stupid shit that has no fucking meaning whatsoever. Like, it's so arbitrary that, like, my fucking phone could win the award. Like, it's not anything meaningful. It's not like you had a mental health program that impacted your department's mental health by 20%. I don't know. I'm just making it up. Something meaningful, something tangible that you can bite into. There's none of that, because there's no national standard from this organization. You pay your $95 and you're in.
No, and if you give an award too for fixing a problem, then you have to admit that you had a problem in the first place, and that's impossible.
And then these departments hire this international organization to do their hiring for them for chief positions and deputy chief positions. Conflict of interest much?
No.
Maybe. I don't know.
So,
Like,
so there's another organization, and I can probably say this one. I'm just gonna say it.
Oh, here we go.
The it's more of a research forum than an organization. The perf committee.
oh,
I mean,
Oh,
has anything? And
jeez.
I believe me, that's a comedy routine right there. But you read anything that's come out of them over the last few years, there's nothing that talks about people or mental health within the profession. Nothing. Nothing talks about acquiring talent, retaining talent.
yep.
Nothing. Nothing.
I, I'll take it. You know what? I see your call out, and I'll raise you a call out, which is my favorite are the mental health organizations that I spoke about earlier that are more focused on getting government grants geared towards law enforcement mental health and getting them and doing nothing with them, or using that grant money not what it's purposed for, but to further your agenda as an organization,
So
or to
basically,
pay
just to
your
fund the
people.
organization.
Right, it
Yeah.
is. Because then you see like the president who's supposed to really care about law enforcement suicides collecting a salary. Or when you look at their books, they're spending it on
Uh-oh.
frivolous things. And you're like, hmm, I don't see you holding any type of like training sessions for law enforcement officers to impact their mental health. You could
See, now
post
I
all
need to
day.
know. I won't ask, but I'm going to need
Oh,
to
you
know.
can ask me offline. You can ask me
Oh yeah.
offline because
Oh, I will.
I have
I will be.
I have two specifically that are in my fucking heartburn list that really irritate me because they're really good at making Facebook posts and reminding you of how many law enforcement suicides there were, but they don't make a fucking impact at all. Because when I was sitting at the edge of my bed with a gun in my hand, I didn't even know who the fuck they were. I didn't even know who the fuck they were. So they aren't in every department with a poster up in the locker room saying, "Hey, fucked up?" question mark. Call this number, like call cop line or something like that. I didn't know any of that stuff. So that's how ineffective you are as an organization if you think that just posting every day, hey, we're at 19 suicides for law enforcement and 16 line of duty deaths. Look how much more suicides we are. Thanks for fucking reminding us. What are you doing about it? You got a $200,000 federal grant from the DOJ or the BJA. What are you doing with it? Where's the money going?
It's to
Like
fund the organization.
it totally is. And I have some inside information. I used to know somebody that worked for a couple of them, and it's like no other. It's like every other organization out there that are like, oh, I love trees so much, and they take in millions of dollars for trees, but they've got fucking wood all over the fucking place in their offices and at home and shit like that. It's like, what the fuck are you doing?
We're in
Like,
a log cabin.
yeah, in a fucking log cabin or somebody that's like not. I don't want to say the P word, but the animal organization that hates people that abuse animals, but they show up to work in a fucking mink coat. You're like, what the fuck are we doing here? That's what it's like. It's literally like that. And there's tons of them out there. I don't mean to pick on just the two or the National Chief Association that I'm talking about, but do better. Like, what caliber of chief are you trying to bring to law enforcement right now? There's a crisis going on, and the new generation of officers that are coming in are very familiar with suicide. These kids grew up that suicide is the answer to everything, and
No, and
now
I
they're
think they're going to have a really, really rude awakening with Gen Z. The,
yeah.
the the younger end of Gen Z in particular, they're going to have a really rude awakening because first of all, these kids they'll just man, fuck it, fuck you, and I'm out. And
Oh,
they'll leave. They'll leave with no
Yes.
other job. They'll
Yes.
just walk out the door. Um,
I read
they're-
an article that they're 3 to 5 year officers. The Gen Zs that are coming out, 3 to 5 year officers.
but see, that's going to create another problem for us.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
we're never going to develop long-term experience and institutional knowledge, all those critical skills that come with 10, 20 years on the job who the hell's going to be around to even gain them?
Well, I just saw an article, I think it was Philly police lowered their standards. I saw a picture of their new recruits that just started the academy, and half of them were over the age of 40. Half of them were over the age of 40. Are you fucking crazy?
Yeah.
Are you crazy? Like, I get you want to be a cop, but it's a young person's game right now. Like, I don't know about you, Al and Denny, but I'm not fucking running after anybody unless it's a fucking Krispy Kreme truck.
No, I mean it really is. So we used to joke about that you know, the cop, when you're on the street, you know, you get older, but the bad guys don't seem to ever get older. And it really is.
It's a different time right now where everybody's running from you. Like if they're wanted, I remember back even when I first started in law enforcement, it was a 50-50 chance if they were going to run. Now, if they're wanted, they're going to roll the dice because
There's incentive now everywhere, particularly when you look at some of the major cities. There's incentive to run. There's incentive to not cooperate. There's incentive to fight. I mean, we've baked that into the process at this point.
Yep. And we got body cameras now, which, you know, I could go on for 3 hours about body cameras. There's pros and cons.
Exactly.
It exonerates officers. At 99.9% of the time, it shows officers doing the right thing. But look at the cost. Look at the cost of it. Like, and you're paying your officers shit. I mean, it's such a disgusting problem right now, like within law enforcement, like pay and benefits. The defund the police movement. They didn't defund. See, and this, let me break it down for some folks that are listening. The defund the police movement had nothing to do with defunding and firing cops. They've infiltrated the politicians to now defund your pensions, your benefits, and make it so unattractive that nobody wants to join it.
Well, and I also think you look at like places like Manhattan, Los Angeles, with the DAs. And that's just two places. Chicago's dealing with the same issue. That's defunding the police by another means.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, you know, say what you want about our former president and whether or not he should be prosecuted. I mean, again, I'm not an attorney. If he wants to prosecute the president, fine. How can we prosecute the fucking robbers and rapists? And
can we start with
the gun crime and everything? Can we prosecute the day-to-day criminal offenses for the love of God?
And I'll tell you this, I'm an apolitical person. So when I go in the booth and I vote, I look at what benefits me. And it's very selfish, but that's the voter life. What's going to be in my paycheck? Because eggs aren't getting any cheaper. And so I can care less about blue or red. I really don't. When you look at the situation in Manhattan and you truly are a law-abiding person, that display should scare the shit out of you.
Oh, absolutely. And then that's the problem. Nobody's pulling the politics out of it, the partisan politics out of it, and look at it in terms of this man is devoting all of this time, energy, and resources. But meanwhile, day-to-day crime just goes unchecked.
Yeah, meanwhile, the community that he's elected to serve is still suffering and being beaten down. So he's doing nothing to benefit that community.
Well, and I tell you, when they announced that they were going to arrest him, and I grew up in New York City. I grew up with Trump my whole entire life. I didn't care for the guy when I lived in the city because he was a very arrogant person. He did a lot of great things for law enforcement. I'll tell you that. But when it was announced that it was going to happen, I was a very unbiased person. I said, I want to see the indictment. That's what I want to see. I want, as a cop, Al and Denny, and everybody else, I want to see what you're charging the person with.
That's right.
This has got to be really good. For you to indict a former president, it's got to be really, really good. When that came out and they released the documents, and the charges just repeated over and over and over and over. And then he gets up there during the press conference and they ask him, well, what was the underlying crime? And he goes, according to the law, I don't need an underlying crime. If you, as a law-abiding citizen, cop or not cop, don't understand how bad that is, to manipulate the judicial system, man, the dam is open. Like you can't
No, and
operate.
he was twisting himself into knots to make this a felony and get around the statute of limitations. But this is also the same DA that unless you got a firearm, and I mean an actual firearm, he doesn't want to prosecute armed robbery.
No, he also said in 2018 that he believes that shoplifting is to correct the balance of racial injustice.
And exactly, and you know what? The problem is that conversation. These conversations are not being had, and because everybody's it's red, it's blue, it's Republican, it's Democrat, it's Trump, it's I hate Trump, but yeah, that's exactly the prism these things need to be viewed through, and that's what we are having to work around.
Well, you're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, it's scary in the sense that you're prosecuting the wrong people, and you look around in Manhattan, the city I was born and raised in. I mean, I lived there for 28 years before I moved down to Virginia, and I look at it now. I will not go back there to visit.
No, my wife was in Manhattan this weekend, and said couldn't wait at the curb for the Uber. You had to step all the way back, and the reason you couldn't wait at the curb was because there were so many rats.
Oh my!
Fucking around in the gutter. It was just, she's like, I'd never seen anything like it, and she grew up there. She grew up in that area.
Yeah, I was a cop there, and I tell you, just seeing everything that's going on right now, it's like it's heartbreaking because we've basically let the inmates run the asylum. Like it's
that's exactly right.
Yeah, we got off on a political tangent on this, but
that was my fault. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, it all works together, which is like, I mean, we're seeing it in all of our municipalities. Like, do you want to be a cop that runs after somebody and you get into a shooting with this person and it's totally justified, and then you find yourself having a grand jury convened over your decision? And
it's almost like you're playing Russian roulette. I mean, it's just a matter, you're playing Russian roulette with your career and really your life and well-being.
Well, we have a situation down here, and again, I'm not going to get too far into it because we're going to talk about this at length. But we have a prosecutor that's basically using the criminal process to because they have an axe to grind with an agency head down here.
Yeah.
And some poor workaday schmuck is getting caught in the middle of this.
Well, we have it up here. Fairfax County Fairfax County Police Department here in Virginia, an officer chased somebody for shoplifting, chased them into the woods. They shot him. They killed him. Grand jury was convened. Grand jury cleared him, which I was very surprised about. Even you guys should check that body cam footage out. Even I was surprised he got cleared. But the Commonwealth attorney reconvened a second special grand jury.
Oh wow.
This is a Commonwealth attorney that hates the fucking police.
I know this Commonwealth attorney.
Yeah. Little Napoleon, they call him. Now, like I said to you, I watched the body cam footage. You look at the totality of everything. It's a $300 pair of fucking sunglasses. Like, Mom, what are we doing? And we knew who he was. Come on, what are we doing? So I get that.
Yeah,
but the judicial system is designed for everybody. It's not designed for individuals based on your profession. Grand jury says no go. It's a no go. Roll on. Live another day. He probably won't ever be a cop again somewhere. Move on. But this Commonwealth attorney's like, no. No, no, no. I'm going to keep trying until I get the outcome that I want. And folks don't understand that that's happening all over the place. And that is not what I swore an oath to. That is not the judicial system that I signed up for.
And to get back to kind of like the underlying conversation, because and I think people outside the profession, and we have a lot of people that we know of that have nothing to do with law enforcement that listen to this and kind of give you some perspective. This is what's impacting upon all of us. It is, whether it is our in-house stuff or the stuff that's coming from political circles, from the political class, using us as a punching bag.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it adds to the stress. It adds to that overall stress to the greatly. Because I mean, I've got a lot of friends still in law enforcement, and when we still have conversations and talk about it, and they're like, what do you think? What's going on? And I'm not sure how I should, what I should do when I'm at work, how proactive I want to be. And I've always been like, in this day and age, you really got to, I don't want to say dial it back, but you got to be selective.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get yourself wrapped up into something. And now you're looking at, am I going to get charged? Where, years ago, it may have been would have been either nothing, or maybe you had a small policy violation, but now it's like, can we turn this into a criminal charge? And then now it's so bad where you may not even be going to look for something, but just the fact that you got called to respond to a call and it doesn't go the way a prosecutor wanted it to go. Now you're on the receiving end of potentially being charged.
Yeah.
And that's frightening.
I don't think I'd be able to do the job today. Like I don't, and I honestly think I don't even think I'd apply for the job today in the current climate that we're in. Not just from the prosecutor's standpoint, but just from the lack of support that you get within these agencies. Before, back in the day, you made a mistake, there were people there were mentors, there was a guardian mindset of, hey, how do we make this better? How do we make this officer better?
Right.
Now it's a fucking vicious leadership within law enforcement across the U.S. It's more of like, I fucking got you, and I need you gone so that I can tell the public, look how transparent I am as a chief. Look at what I'm doing to get rid of the riffraff within my agency. You're not getting rid of riffraff. You're getting rid of hard, proactive officers that need better training. And when we look at training as a whole on law enforcement, and you both can speak to this, really, how much training do we get in de-escalation after the academy? Fuck, we're lucky if we can go to the range twice a year.
No, and departments that are engaging in de-escalation training, which is commendable if you're doing it, but it's straight classroom.
Yeah, it's boring. It's boring shit where you disconnect after 15 minutes. You're like, I don't want to hear a doctor or somebody from academia come into roll call and tell me about de-escalation. I want to hear a guy that's been involved in a shooting because his mouth got him into that point. Like,
no, because a lot of people in the training community, the contract training community, are kind of like the Chiefs community. They go where the money is.
100%. There's so many former cops out there doing training or owning training companies. And this is why I can never own one, because one, no chief would ever hire me to come into their agency and spit out the stuff that I say in Police Mental Health Barricade, or The Dark Side of the Thin Blue Line, or Lost Between Two Worlds. All these books that I wrote scare the shit out of poor law enforcement leaders, because if they read them, they have to do a self-reflection. They have to do an inventory of themselves, and they go, fuck, I do that. Oh shit, I do that. Because they do that. They're positional equity leaders. There's a lot of positional equity leaders, which those of you that don't know what that is, that are listening, positional equity leader is I will only do for you if it benefits me. That's the only way I'll look at it.
Transactional leadership.
Correct. What
Yep.
used to be transactional leadership now, like that is transactional and then some. It is so bad right now where it's like you need to have a rabbi to get promoted. You need somebody that's going to shelter you and be your Sherpa and be like, I'm going to make sure that you get promoted in order for you to climb the ranks. Because if you think like now in law enforcement, if you think going out there and grinding every day and being a hard charging officer is going to get you sergeant and lieutenant, you got another fucking thing coming. Because that scares the shit out of chiefs now. Proactive officers scare the shit out of command staff. Scares them because they're like, you're a liability. I'm worried about what you're going to do. I'm worried you're going to get a complaint. And you're like, 10 years ago, complaint. Who gives a fuck? Like, as long as it's not sustained, at least, as long as you're in the confinements of the law and the department policy, you should be good to go. That's
Right. It was viewed as the cost of doing business.
Correct. Now,
as long as you were within the law, within policy, you were exercising good ethics.
yeah,
It was the cost of doing business. That was it.
Now you look at police general orders for departments, they're so vague, and there's a reason for that.
Oh yeah, they are management focused entirely.
Yeah. Because when I went through my thing, what they wrote me up for, and the final one was untruthfulness, and I was like, according to who? You're finding me guilty of untruthfulness.
That's the kiss of death.
That's the kiss of death in law enforcement because you can't testify in court. But the thing is untruthful because I won't tell your version of the truth. That makes me untruthful? No. And that's what ultimately wound up happening with me was the coup de grace. Because they first charged me with theft, and they didn't have anything. They couldn't prove it. So they charged me with failure to secure city property and being untruthful.
So Nick, for the people that are just getting introduced to you through this podcast, what was the circumstances of the theft allegation?
So I was the sergeant in charge of the community policing unit. We had a ton of equipment. Like we worked with the police foundation of my agency, and we bought like speakers, and we bought all this other stuff. And at the same time, I also owned a DJ company. And so I would use my own stuff in the community, and then I would also like use whatever the department's property was. And there came a point when I decided I wanted to leave the agency. I'd had enough. I had a lieutenant that I had a hostile work environment claim on, and they were doing nothing about it. So it comes time for me to leave, and I was emailing the person who's in charge of the foundation, and I'm like, hey, let's do an inventory of everything before I leave. And whatever's missing, because we used to get shit stolen from us all the time because we would go into the inner cities. We'd go into the worst of the worst communities. And I can't even tell you how many speakers I got stolen or how much audio equipment I got stolen from my own personal inventory. And this person was like, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. And I was like, we need to do an inventory, whatever's missing, because I'm the sergeant of this unit. I'm personally responsible for it. I'll cut you a check for it. And thank God I had all this in emails, because when they couldn't get rid of me because of the podcast, I left the department and I came back, and they demoted me. I was a sergeant when I left. I was gone for 2 weeks. They demoted me back down to an officer. And the lieutenant's process came out. So I took the lieutenant's process and I scored number 4. They were going to promote 7. And the sergeants got together and tried to file a lawsuit to stop me from getting promoted. And it didn't go anywhere. And then, like, the day after the results from the lieutenant's process came out, my co-host called me and was like, hey, there's a rumor going around that you're being investigated for theft. And I'm like, theft? What the fuck are you talking about? I thought it was a joke. He's like, yeah, they're saying you took a whole bunch of equipment when you left the department the first time. And I was like, that's bullshit. I got emails right here that show. And I didn't hear anything for a couple of months. When I left the department and they brought me back, they put me on probation for a year. My probation was supposed to end on April 20th. April 15th, I got pulled into II. April 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And about an hour and a half interrogation. They first read me Miranda, said they were looking at it criminally. And I told them to go pound sand. I wasn't talking without an attorney. And I was the union vice president at the time. And the captain who interviewed me was like, all right, well, we're not going to do the criminal part. We'll do the administrative. And I was like, hold up. Department policy says you have to finish a criminal investigation first before you do an administrative investigation. And he goes, well, on the surface, it could be criminal, but we're going to handle this administratively. I was like, what the fuck is going on? We went on for an hour. Yeah, we went on for like an hour and a half. And it boiled down to I was pulling stuff out. So I had a couple of months between the time my co-host told me what he heard and the time I got pulled in. And I printed out all these emails and everything that I had. And I'm in this interrogation and I'm pulling stuff out of my binder and I'm handing it to the captain. And he's just sliding it in a folder, not even looking at it. And it dawned on me. I was like, man, this was planned a long, long fucking time ago. They were pissed that I was going to get promoted to a lieutenant from an officer, from a master police officer to a lieutenant. They were pissed. And I know this because at the time, I really didn't think that my chief would be this stupid and malicious. Right when the lieutenant's process was about to happen, everybody was studying for the lieutenant's process. And my counterpart, so I was the vice president of the officers union. The vice president of the sergeants union came to me and he goes, hey, do you have a second? And I said, yeah, sure. And he's like, I just left the chief's office. And I want you to know that we were talking about you taking the lieutenant's process. And I was like, yeah, I know you guys are really all fucking bent out of shape about it. And I'm not going to withdraw my application. And he goes, well, I'm just telling you, when I told him that the sergeants had a problem with it, he told me, don't worry about Nick. There's something else working in the background. And I had no
man
clue what he was talking about.
Wow.
No fucking clue. I never in a million years thought that was going to happen. So I got pulled in the 15th of April. I asked for a polygraph. This was during COVID, right when COVID first started. I was denied. Have you ever heard of anybody wanting a polygraph?
No. I've never heard of going, oh, we're not going to give you one. Really?
Yeah. And the reason why they didn't want to do that was because you can't take the polygraph in your own agency for bias purposes. You'd have to have another agency do it, and that would take 2 weeks to set up. My probation ended in 5 days. So if I went over the 20th, I would have grievance rights. So I left II. They said, hey, you can go back out on the street. And I was like, hold up, you just accused me of stealing for an hour and a half. Now I'm good to go back out on the street? Like,
So
yeah, sure.
they accused you of stealing, and then they didn't say, you're going to be on administrative leave. You're going to ride a desk. We're going to suspend your police powers. None of that. Just get back out there like it's a normal day.
That's what I had expected. I had expected that I was going to get suspended.
That's what anybody would have expected with that kind of charge.
And they were like, no, you can go back out on the street. And
but it's almost like they showed their hand when they didn't do that.
Well, and then I didn't see. I was very naive. I didn't know that what they were doing. And 3 days later, I was out of town, and the II sergeant who I went to the academy with called me and was like, you need to come into headquarters right now. And I was like, yeah, that's not gonna. I'm in Boston. And at the time that this happened, my department had put an email out saying that we were restricted on travel. I don't know if you guys had that during COVID. My department was super worried about COVID, and they said we couldn't travel to Boston, New York, Florida, and California.
No, didn't have that.
Yeah, we didn't have that.
So we had that. And he was like, what are you doing in Boston? I was like, it's none of your business what I'm doing in Boston. And he's like, well, you know that's restricted. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, I'm just letting you know that I'm going to be opening up a separate investigation into you violating that. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And he's like, well, you need to respond into headquarters today. I go, I'm not flying all the way back. And he was like, all right, I want the address of where you are. And I was like, what the He's like, I'm overnighting your suspension paperwork. And what I want you to do is it'll be there next day air, FedEx next day air. I want you to take a picture of you signing it, and then I want you to hold it up next to you, showing you holding the suspension paperwork. I was like, yeah, I can see Al's like,
What?
Al's like fidgeting. Yeah, isn't that fucking bonkers? And it gets worse.
What a circus!
Yeah, it's a fucking clown show. And I turned around and I was like, okay. So next day, 10 a.m., the fucking front desk gets it, and they call my room, and they're like, hey, you got a package here. 10:01, my phone rings. It's dickhead from II. And he's like, your package got there. I need you to go down there, do what I told you to do yesterday. I'm like, I go back to my room. I fucking fill out a resignation memo, and I send it to my chief. And my phone rings, and it's the chief. And he's like, don't jump to any conclusions. I'm the final person. I haven't even looked at the file yet. I'm not accepting your resignation. And I was like, listen, I know the fucking writing is on the wall. He's like, don't do anything stupid. I'm not accepting your resignation. An hour later, my phone rings. It's dickhead from II. And he goes, respond to headquarters with all of your equipment and anything else you stole from the department on Monday.
Wow. They used the word stole.
Yeah, stole. And he was like, do not park in the parking lot. Don't come on department property. We will meet you on the street. Which is funny because that's public property, police department. But anyway, I get there Monday, and they were waiting for me with trash cans. And they took all my shit and threw it in a trash can. Like all my uniforms, my badge, everything. They threw it in a trash can. And they were like, we got a message for you from the chief. And I was like, I got a message for you for the chief. He was like, the chief said your resignation is accepted effective today. And I didn't realize it until after. By accepting my resignation, I gave up grievance and litigation rights because I resigned rather than be fired. And so I got a copy of my final rec. And
was that from the city?
Yeah.
Or your locality?
City of Alexandria. Yeah.
They said that if you resign, you give up litigation rights?
Correct. Which is not true.
That doesn't sound right to me at all.
That comes into play later on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, they get that comes in later on. But so anyway, I leave the department and I'm distraught, like I'm upset. And I'm applying for jobs like left and right. And I'm going on these phone interviews and I'm nailing them. Like I'm just, when you do a job interview and you're like, I fucking got that. And then like I'd get an email, thanks for applying. We're going to go in a different direction, or we chose somebody else. Until finally I apply for this government job where I need a top secret clearance. And my my background investigator calls me and I was like, I got to call your old department. And I was like, and she's like, what do you think they're going to say about you? And I go, nothing good. Nothing good. I was like, we don't have a good relationship. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to call them. And then like 5 hours later, she calls me and she's like, what happened over there? And I'm like, well, how much time do you have? She goes, I have never seen a department hate somebody as much as they fucking hate you. She's like, you need to FOIA my background investigation when I'm done with it, because in 30 years of doing background investigations, I've never seen an agency disparage somebody as much as they did with you. And I was like, well, they just fucking hate me. And she was like, no, you need to FOIA this. And I did. And it took like 90 days, 3-4 months for me to get it. And then it came to me like in a secured folder. Like I had to like put some password shit in and stuff. And it was 150 pages. And the sergeant from II wrote all this shit like about me that was not truthful at all. Like at all. Like,
wow.
really bad shit, like slanderous shit, like shit that could be easily disproved, and was disproved because the background investigator was like, now I need to send you for a polygraph and I need to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, let's go. And I went for a polygraph, passed the polygraph with flying fucking colors. And he put in there that I was mentally unstable, that I couldn't hold position of public trust, that
Jeez.
I publicly spoke about my separation from the police department on my podcast. Like, who puts that on a background investigation, a federal background investigation? The Alexandria City Police Department does.
So at some point, did you start thinking about how many zeros you wanted before that decimal?
Yeah, I did. I did, and I'll be happy to tell you and your listeners that I'm not allowed to talk about it because of an agreement.
So I'm just going to go out there and speak for you and say it's safe to assume that you were adequately taken care of.
The city of Alexandria and I don't have any issues anymore and have resolved our differences. And no one is to blame because of no one's to blame in those differences at all. We're both equally responsible.
Were you?
I like it.
Were you reading that off a card?
I'm reading the settlement agreement right here.
You just have it taped to the console.
Just
I like it.
Just for 5 years. That's and those are the stupid decisions that those idiots made in the department. So some of them know, some of them don't know what the city had to do, because in Virginia, which you both know, in Virginia, anything over 10 years within law enforcement, you qualify for LEOSA, which is retirement without a pension. So you can retire, you get retirement creds. They refuse to give me my creds. They refuse to give me my retirement. They refuse to give me everything. And they said the reason being is that I didn't leave the department in good standing. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, because just before all this shit happened, I got my review and it was all outstanding. So
Right, and you resigned.
Did
You weren't terminated.
Did anybody from your old agency, did they move on to other things afterwards as a result of
So the chief, who I zeroed in on, I pounded this fucker with FOIA requests every week. It was getting to the point where the city attorney was getting fucking tired of me. So January 6th happened, the insurgents at Capitol Hill happened, and he turned around and told the whole department. I still have snitches within the department that were telling me, hey, January 6th happened. He wouldn't let us go. He put an email out, and this person forwarded me the email, and it basically said, hey, listen, we weren't asked to go to the Capitol. And that's a bunch of horseshit, because you're part of the U.S. Capitol region. Like, it's part of your federal funding that if something like that happens, you must go. So it was a real big red flag when he sent out an email saying, hey, we received nothing from U.S. Capitol Police. We received nothing from Metro Police Department saying that they need help. And I'm like, this fucker's lying. So I do a FOIA. And sure as shit, I get the FOIA. I get a FOIA of everything. I get the email that he got from the Sergeant of Arms requesting for the Alexandria City Police Department to come help.
Oh, shit.
Something. And he lied. So I still had the department's every department has a department-wide email. You know that department-wide email, you could spread an email out to everybody. So I took the FOIA request and the FOIA documents and I sent it to the whole department.
Hey, you guys.
And
that's beautiful.
Well, not as beautiful as this. So there was an insurgence to the point where the city manager got involved. They were ready to lynch him outside. The department had finally had enough, because I had caught him in several lies through FOIAs, and I was releasing it. I kept releasing it. So all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get this phone call from another snitch of mine that works at City Hall, and they're like, hey, the chief he's donezo. he's out. And no sooner did I find that out, like a couple hours later, there's a release that the chief is retiring with 2 weeks notice. Now, I don't know about you. I've never heard of a chief ever retire with 2 weeks notice. 2 weeks notice means I'm resigning because I'm about to get my fucking ass fired.
We just had one down in this area. Yeah, they were 2 weeks notice, vacation effective immediately.
Yeah, he actually wrote his out, and me and a whole bunch of officers that got forced out by him were waiting at the front door with big signs up, sending him off like, "Good luck in California, you piece of shit."
Please tell me there's video of that from somewhere.
Well, what's funny is he found out that we were there, and he slinked out the back door.
What a chicken!
Slinked out the back fucking door. So this fucking numbnut puts his house up for sale, and
I know the story. This is great.
It's a good story, right? So he uses Redfin, and he puts his house up for sale. So I'm like, I got to fuck with him. So I book every time slot available, Saturday and Sunday. His first week. And then I go to the open house, and I leave my book on his bed. And just to put salt on the wound, I left one in his refrigerator.
Can you imagine what he said when he saw that?
That motherfucker.
Son of a bitch.
I got to tell you, I was shitting bricks because I didn't know what I knew, because I had sold my house just right around then, and I knew you're not supposed to be in an open house as an owner. You're supposed to be not there. It's usually the real estate broker. So I was nervous as shit that he might still be there. So like I was super fucking nervous, and I did all my research to make sure I couldn't get arrested because I was like, they'll find some stupid shit to arrest me on, and not that I got away with it, but it was fucking hilarious. But it didn't stop there. Like he was gone, and we were still doing the podcast. Denny came to my cafe. We owned a coffee shop before we closed it. Thanks to the supply chain issues. Thank you so much, Joe Biden. Anyway, so so we had a podcast studio in the cafe. It was really cool. And I did a story about a female officer at that department that confided in me while I was the vice president of the union, that she was sexually assaulted by another officer during a party. And 2 days later, I had a police detective from my old agency in my fucking cafe. Like, in my cafe. And my cafe was in the town, like 5 towns away from the city. Like, they have zero jurisdiction. And he knew that I was going to go tell him pound sand, because when he was like, "Hey, I want to talk to you," and I was like, "Is it about APD?" And he's like, "Yep." And I go, "Go fuck yourself." And he handed me this letter, and I like threw it to the side, and I looked at it like later on, and it basically was like, "We're sorry that you don't want to talk to us, but we really want to get to the bottom of this and find out who the victim is." And I was like, no, I didn't even answer the letter, but I just thought it was funny how much brain power went into that letter. Like, how many people wrote that letter, had to like skim over it, how many commanders, and nothing came of it. From what I had heard is that they wanted to charge me with obstruction of justice.
What?
Because I wouldn't give up who the victim was.
Wow.
They wanted to charge me with obstruction of justice because I was a mandatory reporter. And I was actually scared because legitimately it could have happened, because you are a mandatory reporter with sexual assault. And then there's provisions to that law, which is clergy, union representation, and a doctor, a mental health doctor, like psychiatrist or whatever.
Right.
And I fell in that category, thank God, because they would have been stupid enough to charge me with disorderly conduct.
No doubt.
Obstruction of
Obstruction.
justice. But
No doubt.
it was just clown show shit like that was going on after I left. I'll get an occasional Facebook message here and there of like a commander with their fake Facebook account making comments on the roll call room page and shit. I just find it hilarious now because here we are almost 3 years later and they're still, it's still occupying headspace.
That's crazy.
It's just how frail are your little egos that they can't handle that.
And after all this time, still trolling you.
And that's the thing is that nobody has ever left that agency and has done what I did. And they were pissed. They were pissed because they really didn't anticipate the digital or the social media side of the ramifications. Like, had I have not have started our podcast, The Roll Call Room, until after I left, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But by the time I left the department, there were over 25,000 people listening to the show. So that's why they were scared, was because they couldn't contain it and we wouldn't shut it down. And they really underestimated the power of listeners. They really underestimated the reach that we had. And it backfired in their face because every time that department posts that they're doing an exam for prospective hires, I always post a link to Police Mental Barricade. And I always fucking put on there, before you apply to this agency, read this book, please. I'll even send you a free copy. Read it. And I know whoever's doing their press hates it.
It's crazy. Like the chief gets shown the door, and the henchmen are still running around carrying his water.
Worse than ever, because now the chief now. So the chief now, I worked for him when he was a lieutenant and a captain, and then he became the deputy chief, and then they gave him the chief job after Dickhead left. And I sent him an email, and I said, hey, listen, it's time to put things to the side, and it's time for you to do the right thing. It's time for you to sign off on my retirement. It's time for you to do the right thing. No fucking answer. No answer to my email. And not like I expected him to answer it. But I said it before. If they had given me my stuff, if they had given me my retirement creds and given me what I earned, they would have never fucking heard from me again. You would never hear me talk about the Alexandria City Police Department again. And now I make it a mission every fucking chance I can to talk about it. Because they're the epitome. Like, they're ground zero of the fucking clown show of law enforcement. Like, if you want to go to a place and see literally how not to run things, that's the fucking place to go. And it's been that way for a long fucking time. And they're just incestuous because they just keep promoting people from within that have the same ideology. And then when they do go outside, they get the guy from the OK Corral that shoots his daughter. Like, who's doing the hiring over there? Like Stevie Wonder? Like,
well, it's okay. So this conversation got had coming off of Ferguson and going into George Floyd. It was like, well, how much goodwill do agencies have in the bank when something goes wrong with the public, right? So what we're not doing is looking at that in terms of our people, management, and employees, right? You said if you had just gotten treated right at the end, you'd have just kind of gone off into the sunset, and that'd have been that.
Yep.
Right? And you didn't. And the Lord works in mysterious ways. And so that's it, a little humility, a little bit of, yeah, I don't agree with so-and-so, I don't like so-and-so, but I'm going to do the right thing. This little act to make it right because that's a deposit in the Goodwill Bank.
Yep.
And the deposit in the Goodwill Bank for your people is just as important as it is for the public.
Well, and I'll tell you what hurts the most, Al, is not even being pushed out the door after that much time. What hurts the most is being a sergeant and having a lot of people that worked underneath me that I saved their jobs when I could have been a hammer, when I could have hurt their careers that I covered for, that I don't hear a fucking peep from. That's what hurts. Because you look at that and you're like, you're a piece of shit. These are people that I've gone to their weddings. I was there for the birth of their children. I went to birthday parties. I went to cookouts with these people. These were people that I trusted. And when that all happened, no one fucking reached out to me. Nobody once turned around and was like, yo, are you okay? I know that shit's bullshit. Not one fucking person.
You know,
And
that's
I got secrets for fucking days. Like, and I drop these little ditties. I drop these little sprinkles on the Alexandria City Police Department's Facebook page every once in a while. I turn around and I go, well, what about in 2008 when 2 officers raped a domestic violence victim? What about that?
Jesus.
I drop them on them, and I do it because it infuriates me the amount of stuff that goes on, that went on and continues to go on, and the citizens don't fucking know. Like, they just don't know. But that department will crush somebody like myself or other people after me. Like, I've had people didn't talk to me at all when I left, right? Then they find themselves in the same predicament where the department is fucking them, and then they get shown the door, and my phone rings. I'm the first phone call. And they're like, Nick, I thought you were out of your fucking mind. They made it seem like you were fucking crazy, but I just went through it. Let me tell you what they did to me. And you're like, yeah, you didn't see this? Like, they're like, no, I trusted them. I thought that they were going to do a fair investigation. And I'm like, well, how does it feel now? And they still do it. They still fucking do it. Their big thing at that old agency, and this is the part that makes them wicked. Their part is that not only do they want you gone, but they want to affect you earning ever. Like, they don't ever want you to be able to get another job. And that's vindictive.
That is not the first time that I've heard that said by somebody.
Yep.
Well, you know, what's disappointing is, as bad as your agency is and as bad as they conduct themselves and will
It's
go to
not
great
limited
lengths.
to that agency.
Correct. And that's why you have such a great following on the Roll Call Room, and why you have so many people interested in the books that you write, is because that is unfortunately a common theme in so many agencies across the country. That's what's really this. It's, you know, it'd be one thing if you have one or two, or, you know, a few bad agencies here and there, but it's not. It's a lot.
It's
unfortunate.
because leadership is the 800-pound gorilla in the room that nobody wants to talk about.
Yep.
Nobody is talking about it in the press. Nobody is talking about it in the political class. Nobody is talking about it in academia. No one is talking. What is wrong with policing? How can we fix policing? And nobody is bringing out the giant mirror and staring at it.
Well, it comes back to full circle. We talked about with the leadership is everything is to support the leadership, and everything is geared towards to protect them, support them, and they're not the issue. It's the issue at the bottom, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, and to what Al said is that when the George Floyd thing happened, and they were like, we need police reform. There is nobody that's more of an advocate for police reform than this guy right here. But you're looking at it wrong. You need to flip the pyramid. You need to flip the script, because what you're talking about, and I don't mean you, Al, and Denny, I mean the people that are for police reform. What you're talking about is you're talking about reforming Joe, the motor cop. You're talking about Joe, the guy that humps calls all fucking day. You're talking about Joe that's working 3 jobs outside of law enforcement just to be able to feed his family. That's not the guy you need to reform. You need to start from the fucking top. Because let's talk about the Tennessee 5.
God, yeah.
She is still fucking there. She's still there. She's the chief of police. Something like that happens, that's an automatic resignation or termination.
And I will bet you money that this time next year, she's still there.
Oh, no doubt. If she hasn't gone by now, she's solid.
She's solid. And
she cements it in.
She just got forced out of fucking Philly PD before she went to Tennessee.
Was it Philly or Atlanta? I know there's a history in Atlanta, and I did some digging into that, and it was it's amazing that she was still on the job after that.
But here's the thing: is the buck stops at the number one. Something like that happens, you need to resign. Like, didn't we learn anything from Ferguson? Ferguson, although the FBI reports all show that the officer Darren Wilson, he did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. All the reports showed that. But where things went off the rail was once the public lost confidence in law enforcement, the number one has to go. You're the sacrificial lamb, unfortunately. That's the job you chose. When you put those stars on your epaulets, that's the cross you bear. But he waited, and then he didn't talk to the public, and that made it even worse. And so when we're talking about police reform, if we're not talking about a national registry for chiefs of police, then there's just no conversation to be had about police reform, because it's dead in the water. You can fix Joe Motor Cop all you want, but until you fix the fucking top, or unless you have an independent review of internal investigations, it will always be used as a weapon, a performance management weapon.
And that's one thing. IA does not exist as a performance management tool. Period. Full stop. It never should. And if it's being used that way, not only is it a professional violation, in my mind, it's an ethical violation. I'll stop right there.
Well,
but these conversations. Pardon?
I think II is used as a performance management tool at a lot of agencies.
Yes,
I know it wasn't mine.
No, it's a tool to deal with legal and ethical problems, policy violations. It is not a performance management tool.
But it turns into that.
It is turned into the chiefs in a lot of agencies, and I was one of the victims of it, because my chief used II as a weapon. If I can't get you to go, like if I can't get you out of my department, I'll just bring you up on charges. And as long as I can find you guilty of untruthfulness, it's the coup de grace. You're done.
Oh, and depending on how things are structured, it doesn't even need to get that far.
No.
It doesn't. You don't even need to throw an untruthfulness out there. There are other ways to do it. And again, I'm going to stop right there, because this is going to be a episode for some months down the road.
And I would have respected my chief way more if he would have called me in the office and he would have been like, "Listen, I got to show you the door. It's time for you to leave." You know what I would have said? That's fine. If you're not buying what I'm selling, I'll move on. Give me my retirement creds. Let me leave the same way I left the first time, where you threw me a nice luncheon and you gave me this nice shadow box that I have behind me. Let me leave. Don't drag my name through the mud. Don't try and embarrass me in front of my family. Don't do that. And if you are going to do that, then it's going to work both ways, because I can guarantee you that my former chief will never work in law enforcement again. Just like me, he will never work in law enforcement again.
Do you know where your chief landed?
Yeah, he ran off back to California, because he was originally from California. He was the CHP commissioner during Arnold Schwarzenegger's years. And then he took 8 years off of law enforcement to go work at NHTSA. And my city, when they posted the chief of police job, this guy, a national search, this guy was the best qualified candidate. Hadn't been in law enforcement for 8 years, but he's the best candidate for chief of police.
Wow. Well, that's, I think when you're talking about that police reform, that's what we're getting at really, is it's more needs to be looked at a police leadership reform. Yes. And then the other stuff will fall in line. But until you start to work on the problems at that level, the rest is not going to
and
get
unfortunately,
fixed.
I don't know what it's going to take to tune into CNN or Fox or News Nation in prime time and hear some talking heads having that discussion.
Well,
it's not even close to the radar, much less on it.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
no, because nobody's coming on their shows because they still drink from the police tit. They still drink from the police tit. So they don't want to take a chance and do what we do or what I do with the books and stuff, because they don't want to take a chance and not be invited to a conference to speak, or they're selling a service outside of their speaking points because they're still sucking on those tits. And it's a shameful fucking thing, because you see a lot of former law enforcement officers leave the profession and they hate what happened to them, but they refuse to speak up because they own companies that go around the world, go around the United States and train officers on de-escalation and CIT and all this other stuff. And they refuse to speak up because it affects their wallet. And I get it. I understand it. You need to make a living. I get it. But you got to be able to look in the mirror, because you're not helping the future law enforcement. You're not helping anybody, because you're not fixing the problem. You just ran from it. You're just like, well, I'm out of it. I don't have to deal with that shit no more. But you're not helping it. Like you're not fucking speaking up. And it gets tiresome. Like I think the first year or two I was doing it was getting tiresome, because it was affecting my marriage. It was affecting my family, because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, because doing all of this stuff, all of the fucking ridicule on social media and all that stuff, was it worth it? Now, like now where I am right now, I look back on it and I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'd do it all over again. Shit, I'd do it worse. But at the time when I was doing it, it was like, fuck, can I get some fucking help here?
Yeah.
No, and I think it's a testament to, the person that you are, that you came out on the other side of this, not only okay, but arguably even better. And all those other guys that are just they're in the center of the storm, and they're thinking they can't go on.
Yeah, and I it took me many years to not get to the point where I wasn't angry anymore, and I could sit down and I could start thinking about things. And in all honesty, the department did me a huge favor, because had I have kept my mouth shut and I shut that podcast down and I just played like a good boy, I'd probably be a lieutenant right now. I'd probably be miserable as fuck. My fucking marriage would be in the toilet. Like, there's so many things that would have went south if I had stayed there, that ultimately I would have either tried a second time to kill myself and been successful, or two, I would have died of a heart attack. And then I wouldn't be where I am right now. Like, I'm out of law enforcement now. I think it's 2 years I've been gone, or maybe even a little bit longer. I have a better perspective of things. Like, I look at things in a completely different way now. And it's very eye-opening, because it took a while to like change my mindset and change the way that I think about things, because you just do it for over 20 years. You're like, everybody's a nail and I'm a hammer.
Yep.
And it takes you a while to deprogram that.
It really does.
Yeah, and I want to say this too, because I think, again, there's a lot of people that I know listen to this that are not on the job, and we hope to reach people that are not on the job, that they go, oh, it's just all these old guys, they're just disgruntled and they're angry, and no, it's probably because we love this profession too much.
You're 100% right. Because if I didn't care,
if we didn't care, I mean, it would be nothing. I just, whatever. Sure, boss. Great.
Because I've heard that before. I've heard it before, like with the books and everything. Everybody, from my old agency, they're like, you're only writing these books to make money off of the books. Really?
No, I bought the book. I saw how much you charge for it. You're not making anything.
Right.
Well, by the time Amazon takes their cut, and by the time like you get through everything, it basically pays all of those books pays for my podcast to continue, and the hosting of websites and stuff like that. Trust me, it ain't all what it's cracked up to be. I don't get like being a bestseller is not like Stephen King bestseller. Like I'm not getting residual checks of $1 million.
Right.
And in all honesty, I give more books away for free than probably people buy. And it's to the point where I give them away because I want as many people to read it and be prepared so that when you see somebody doing something, you can turn around and go, oh, I read that in Nick's book. I know what they're doing. And if I can do that and affect a whole bunch of people, it cuts these cowardly leaders off, and it stops this perpetual cycle of just shitty fucking leaders over and over. And the flip side to it is I'm a huge advocate of jump out of the plane and have a parachute, because life is definitely greener on the other side. And anybody that tells you that that's not the case either is working at a place that they're not happy, or they weren't really prepared for the civilian world outside of law enforcement. It pays better and it's better quality of life.
No, and that's important advice, because something I tell younger officers, newer officers, is that have a life, and have a life that is completely separate and disconnected from this place,
Yeah,
and
and I
have
don't think
fun and
people
enjoy yourself.
I don't think people on the job fully understand that, because when I left, remember I told you nobody talked to me, but also my complete friend cycle was all cops, and that
Right.
disappeared. So I went from having like 300 friends to nobody. Like it was lonely. And then it dawned on me. I was like, this is why they tell you don't have just all law enforcement
Yep.
friends,
Yep.
because you also it cultivates a us versus them mentality. But once this job is over, and it's over in one way or the other, either you quit, you get fired, or you retire. And there's a reason why the statistic is out there that retirees tend not to last very long, because they lose all of their friends. They slip into a big, huge, deep depression, and it's hard to get out of that cycle. And
No,
that's what
you've got to have something outside of this.
100%.
You do.
That's why that's why it's important for shows like yours, shows like Roll Call Room, shows like The Shield Within, shows all different law enforcement shows. It's important because as a retiree or somebody that leaves the department should be able to flip on an episode of your show and be like, fuck, this is like being back in the roll call room. This is like being car to car and bullshitting. And if you could do that for somebody for an hour and a half or 2 hours of an episode, that's the goal right there. Like that, your show is 100% worth it if it reaches one person. And that's what the roll call room was for us. We were like, if we could stop one person from eating their gun, then we're good to go. And I've lost count of how many people have emailed and have been like, watch your show. I was going to kill myself. I mean, I've got letters of wives, spouses that turn around and have been like, I confronted my husband and he's been acting weird. And he took, I remember this one letter, still gives me chills. This one letter this lady wrote to me. She was like, I confronted my husband. And I said, you've been acting weird. And I read this book by this guy who's a former cop. And I've been listening to his show. And he's saying, you got some concern and shit. And she said, he took her downstairs to the basement. And he had letters lined up to put on the pool table. He was going to blow his brains out that night.
Jeez.
That night.
Man.
I mean, when you get letters like that, like nothing else matters. Like, what are we doing? And I think that was before I got kicked out of my agency. That was one of the letters that I brought to my chief. And I think for me, that's when it was like personal. It was a personal thing for me. And I felt like he was trying to fucking like censor us. Like he was trying to kick us down. And in all honesty, like all he did was help. He really did, because I think the roll call room tripled in listenership once I got fucking booted out the door. There's the washing machine again.
You got it.
Denny's GIMP uniform is on a delicate cycle right now.
Gotta keep it clean.
It's always so dirty.
It gets so dirty. Well, man, Nick, it's been a good conversation.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you.
And it actually recorded.
Oh, my gosh, right?
Well, that's what we think for now.
Yeah. Nick 7.
Man.
Well, I had a fun.
We definitely appreciate it.
You really are. I think you're doing something that's just so very important. And you know, I honestly, I mean, it helps our profession, but I really, really want people that are outside the job or maybe love somebody who's on the job, or even the people that are like, fuck the police, to listen to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God willing, maybe listen to some of the things we're saying. I mean, we're pretty far from 25,000 listeners, but you know,
yeah, we're a bit far from that.
We'll get there. Don't worry. We're gonna get you guys there. Don't worry.
But thanks so much for coming on, and you know, we'll definitely stay in touch as we always do. But
awesome.
Great conversations, and man, we'll catch up with you soon. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. You take it easy. Be safe.
Nick, thank you very much.
You too, brother.
Awesome.
All right, Owl, I think that wraps it up.
I think it does. Man, that was really good.
That was always fun talking to Nick.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to go that long, but wow.
Man, I didn't think it was going to go that long either, but yeah, good stuff.
Great stuff.
Make sure to check out the Roll Call Room if you haven't checked out the Roll Call Room, and also check out Nick's books. He's got some great books. They're all available on Amazon, so pull him up and check it out.
Yeah, and in the meantime, if you like what you hear, please reach out to us at wearebadgetothebone@gmail.com. Also, find us on Facebook at Badge to the Bone.
All right, so that is going to wrap us up for this episode, and we will be back soon, so make sure to keep a lookout. But until then, stay safe
and be well.
We'll see you.
All right, take care.